Welcome, everybody, to another edition of the Inside ND Sports Podcast. I'm Tyler James. I'm joined once again by the one and only Eric Hansen. Together, we cover Notre Dame football, recruiting, and more for InsideNDSports.com on the Rivals Network. Notre Dame made a statement in College Station with a 23-13 win at Texas A&M last weekend. Now the Irish will look to avoid a slip-up against a Northern Illinois team coming to town for ND's home opener. Marcus Freeman heard from Jim Tressel, his former coach at Ohio State, this week. So we wanted to hear from a former head coach this week as well. So we reached out to Charlie Weis Sr., former head coach at Notre Dame in Kansas, for this week's podcast. Charlie, thanks for joining us.
You're welcome. How's everyone doing?
Doing well.
Great. It's people are always happier, when Notre Dame wins.
Hey, you're preaching to the choir, my man. To the choir.
Yeah, people are nicer even to us when Notre Dame wins. But Charlie, to start, I wanted to ask you, when you start the season on the road with such a big win, what's the key to keeping players locked in for the home opener?
Well, people have to understand that these are still 18 to 23-year-old young men. And probably the biggest thing is the emotional highs and lows that come with the season, the psychological highs and lows that come with the season, and trying to get the players to buy in the fact that it's a marathon, not a sprint, and try to keep the ebbs and flows to a minimum. I mean, obviously going on the road against Texas A&M, which at the time was a ranked team, really shouldn't have been a ranked team, but they were a ranked team, and going on the road, a slight underdog, even though that's just because of the home crowd that they were a slight underdog and the unknown, like what they're going to face. But it was a big win for Notre Dame, and just coming back, you're coming back home against a team that you're a lot better than, and just trying to keep them even keel is probably the biggest task.
Charlie, I'm fascinated by Riley Leonard and kind of the ceiling part of his equation and the production part of his equation up until this point. When you were evaluating quarterbacks, both for drafting purposes and for who you were going to play at Notre Dame, how did you evaluate kind of the around the corner part of the equation about their potential versus what you were seeing on the practice field and their production in game?
So you don't have to talk, like with Riley Leonard, everyone could see athleticism. It doesn't take a brain surgeon that he's a very athletic guy. So it's all the things that go with the athleticism, the leadership, obviously when you watched Duke play, when he was at Duke, I mean, they were a legit team because he was the focal piece. He was the centerpiece. He was, everything spun around him. And bringing him in this year, an older guy, a veteran guy who's been there and done that and played against good competition, you already were getting a known quality. And I think that when you have a known quality coming in, especially a team that expects to be in contention, okay, it makes things a heck of a lot easier being a known quality than, having a bunch of question marks.
Charlie, transferring it obviously has become more popular now. Is there any extra value to seeing how someone like Riley Leonard handles a new situation, seeing him go from one program to another, and how he can sort of make that transition to help you project at what he can do transitioning to the next level?
Well, you got to remember, this offense is new for everyone. It's not just new for Riley Leonard. I mean, you got a new offensive coordinator, and even though he'd been at Notre Dame before, that's it wasn't the offense they were running. So now I think that with Denbrock there, the good thing is you have a guy that says, okay, here's the offense I like to run, but here's the players I have. So let me figure out what I can do with these players right there and do a lot of that. And I think that it all starts with what the quarterback can do and how much can the quarterback handle. And I think the second part of that, how much you can handle, is more of the given than what exactly you can do. Because you got new receivers, you got new weapons, new offensive linemen. There's a lot of new. Fortunately, the way the schedule lays out for Notre Dame is those new guys are going to get an opportunity to get grounded as you get into the more competitive part of the schedule.
Charlie, I'm curious, as we look at these college teams now, they're more and more NFL-like in now that a lot of college teams have GMs, for example, and you have the transfer portal, which is a little bit like trades, although you don't necessarily get back what's going out the door. But I'm just wondering if you would have enjoyed this era of coaching with the NIL, with the transfer portal, and with the GMs and as part of your infrastructure in your coaching.
Well, I'm going to answer that two ways, Eric. First of all, having come from the NFL for 15 years before I went to Notre Dame, I would have been familiar with this. And I don't call it like trades; it's more like free agency,
Right.
than it is the trades, because you're not given anything in return. You're getting something for nothing, so you don't have to give anything up when you bring these guys in. Um, I I wouldn't have felt in a comfort zone at Notre Dame in that under these rules, because I felt that I could go against everybody in the country and represent Notre Dame as a place to go and be able to get top-notch talent. Now here, like I'll use an example, Ole Miss. My kids at Ole Miss.
Right.
I mean, no one's killing the portal more than Lane Kiffin. Now, why is Ole Miss fifth or sixth in the country in all these polls? Because not only were they able to keep a lot of their players back for another year, but Lane knows how to play that game, and it's a great equalizer for schools that aren't able to get all the top-notch high school talent. It's a great equalizer because you can go get yourself a whole bunch of 4- and 5-star guys. They're just coming from other people's rosters, and they're proven quality because they've already played. It's a great equalizer, and I think it really gives a lot of programs an opportunity to be in the mix.
Because you mentioned your son Charlie being the offensive coordinator at Ole Miss, he's on the short list of coaches who are getting to work with a third-year starting quarterback in college football. That doesn't happen as much anymore with all the portal movement and things that are going on. Do you think that's one of the bigger advantages in college football right now?
Well, if you can keep a quarterback in your program for 3 years, it's a miracle. Especially a guy that's that good. I mean, the kid's a first-round draft choice. Now, he probably wouldn't have been a first-round draft choice last year because of the number of guys that were coming out.
Mm-hmm.
But one more year in that system with a bunch of talented players on a good offense, and now the kid's putting himself in a position to be a first-round draft choice. Now he'll probably have to take a cut in pay when he goes to the NFL. Because everyone in the free world wants to do NIL deals with him, and great for him. But I think that the teams that are able to keep a guy in their program like that are going to be teams that are in that, in the tournament at the end of the year.
Charlie, I was curious whether it's Ole Miss or Notre Dame or other college teams. How do you watch a game? And let me preface it this way. I used to talk to Era intermittently, and he would tell me that he would have a legal pad, and he'd still, not to second guess, but he would be kind of writing down coaching points and things. And I'm curious, do you process the game through coach's eyes, or are you able to kind of enjoy the other parts of it?
I'm a fan one time a week, Eric.
Okay.
Okay, I'm a fan one time a week, and I don't like watching Ole Miss games with anyone other than my wife. Because I'm going to be your typical six-pack potato chip guy watching the game, yelling at the TV and everything else. I didn't yell at the TV very much last week, by the way, but that's a whole nother story. But I'm a fan once a week. But every other game, I don't root for anyone to win or lose. I just watch the game analytically. So unless you really know what the play was supposed to be and what was supposed to happen, I mean, we all can see obvious things when we're watching a game. But like there's times the quarterback will throw an interception and everyone will say, God, the quarterback had a bad day. Well, he might be getting hit in the face. You know, in other words, a line might be missing, a running back might miss protection, a line might be getting pushed back into his face, or somebody might be running the wrong route, you know, or the defense just might make a hell of a play, you know. So it's not always just, oh, the quarterback threw an interception. Now, there are times where you wonder, well, what the hell is he doing? And those times do exactly happen. But I watch the game analytically. And, you know, it's better for me this way, Eric, because this way, when I'm watching games, I never root against anybody. But I don't root for anybody either. Because, you know, if teams win or lose, I wake up the next day, I don't have to worry about going to the coffee pot and have everyone whining about their team, how they played, because, you know, everyone wants to complain. Whether you win or lose, people are going to be complaining, right? I mean, let's face it. Like they'll look at all the good things that happen in a game and a win and say, well, God, but we did this and we did that. And if we were playing this team, if we were playing that team, rather than just taking the game at face value. So I have to admit, one time a week, I'm one of those people. And that's when the Rebels are playing. But it's really better for me to watch the game analytically, because I do critique games, but I only critique them to me.
Right.
I don't say one word to anyone else. I don't sit there and say, what were they thinking? You know, no, I think that, but I don't say it, because no one cares about my opinion. I mean, it's just my opinion will stay my opinion.
Charlie, Eric mentioned sort of how college football is becoming more like the NFL in different ways. And what that reminded me of, or made me think of, Al Golden, who built his coaching career in college football, but after a tough go at Miami, he spent several years in the NFL. I'm not sure if you know Al as a fellow New Jersey guy.
You know who his first position coach in the NFL was?
Oh yeah, is that right?
Ask him.
Who is it? Who was it?
Me.
What's your perspective on?
So do I know him?
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. I think I've known him since he was 22.
All right. What's your perspective then on seeing him have success back in college football as Notre Dame's defensive coordinator?
Well, it didn't surprise me. I tried to hire him as my defensive coordinator, but Al Groh asked me not to do it. I talked to him, but Al said no. You know, I asked Al for permission. He said, you can talk to him, but you're not hiring him. So I talked to him, but I wouldn't let me hire him. So now I could have hired him. I didn't need Al's permission to hire him, but I believe there's ethics involved when you're dealing with people that you know. And he asked me to respectfully not hire him, so I didn't. So I wanted to hire him back then. So obviously I thought enough of him then. My opinion hasn't changed. I watch his career matriculate and how things happen, both as a head coach and as an assistant, both in college and in pros. I mean, obviously he's always been a good coach, and he continues to improve.
So I know that you weren't Marcus's first position coach, but I wonder if you two have met, if you guys have talked at all, and just kind of your impressions of him as he kind of moves into year 3 of his regime.
Well, I hate to disappoint the Notre Dame fans, but we're actually friendly, he and I. We exchange text messages. I mean, you know, we talk. We did meet the one time I came into town, and I ended up going to Mike Golick's fundraiser.
Oh, yeah.
The stadium did not fall down when I walked in, by the way. I walked in the stadium. I was afraid it was going to collapse on me while I was there, but it did not fall down. But he came over, and I spent some time with him. And, you know, Mike Denbrock came over and spent some time with him. And I know you got to know Katie Lonergan, but, you know, Katie Lonergan was my girl
Right.
at Kansas. Okay, so when she was interviewing for the job, one of the people who pushed her, backhandedly, of course, was me, because I thought she'd be perfect for that right
He
there.
does do a really good job.
So I, you know, I like Marcus, and I try not to say I don't say anything like I don't try to tell him anything, but I'll send words of encouragement, and he knows that's the party line.
Charlie, I wanted to circle back to the A&M game with the fact that Notre Dame went into that game with an offensive line with 3 first-time starters, including a freshman left tackle and a unit that had 6 combined starts. As an offensive guy yourself, can you describe how difficult of a task that is, and how did you weigh potential versus experience on the offensive line?
I thought that it was going to be a low scoring game. I didn't know who would win, but I thought it would be a low scoring game because I thought that Denbrock would be smart enough not to expose the offensive lineman, and that's basically how it went down. And Notre Dame made the one play, makes the play in a running game because it's a lot easier to hide offensive linemen in a run game than it is in pass protection. And the game went about how I thought it would go.
Just following up on that, Charlie, what's realistic in terms of their growth? Is it realistic to think by October they could look a lot different than they do in September?
Well, they'll be a lot better because any, like I said, I'm not slighting anyone's schedule. I'm just being practical. I
Right.
mean, the schedule is set up in such a way where the more competitive games are after they got a number of games under their belt, which I think is advantageous to the growth of their offense.
Charlie, is there one position above the rest, and maybe it's a simple answer, it's quarterback, that experience matters the most, do you think?
Well, I think that, to be honest with you, the center is
Okay.
it was is the only 2 guys touched the ball on every play. The center and the quarterback. They're
Right.
it. They're the only 2. I mean, so when you have an experienced center, that always helps. But I mean, I don't think experience is nearly as big, at skill positions because they're just going to do what you tell them to do, for the most part, and then try to do things the right way and let talent take over.
Charlie, when you look at Notre Dame playing, do you see a lot of future NFL guys out there running around?
Well, I think that the talent has continued to grow. I mean, even from me to Brian to Marcus, I mean, the talent has continued to get better and better and better. And even though I see a bunch of weaknesses personnel wise right now, I see a bunch of frontline players too, especially a couple of those guys in the secondary right off, slap you in the face right off the bat. But do I see NFL players out there? Absolutely. Do I see, Georgia's players out there? No, I don't see that. But do I see NFL players out there? Absolutely, I do.
Charlie, for people that aren't looking at Zoom, because we just put the audio out here, so I'll describe. You look like a rock star. And you and I have texted a little bit back and forth, so I've kind of kept track of this. Can you let our listeners know about your journey from January 1st of last year? What's been happening to you personally?
Well, Eric, I know you're a grandfather,
Yep.
so no, I'm a grandfather twice, soon to be for the third time,
Wow.
on October 20th. So 3 boys. So I'm a grandfather, and I kind of sat back and reflected that on January 1st of last year, I was 356 pounds. And I mean, I was ready to drop, just, could barely exercise, couldn't even bend over to tie my shoes. And my wife, who's just barely over 100 pounds, as you know, sat down and I've tried every diet. I almost died with a gastric bypass. I mean, I've tried everything. So she got me on intermittent fasting. And intermittent fasting is a different approach where you can eat 8 hours a day, but you can't eat anything for the other 16 hours. So I started that January 1st of 2023, and 135 pounds later, I'm on it. I do it every day. Have not missed one day in the last 2 years of not broken it one day in 2 years. And, now I'm, matter of fact, I sent Braxton Cave a text the other day where I stepped on the scale at 215.
Wow. So my follow-up to that is, I mean, a lot of times when you have this outer journey, there's something that's going on inside. So how do you feel inside, and where is that kind of taken the inside of you, your spirit, your mental side, and just how you feel about life at this point?
Well, you only can have so many people tell you you're a fat piece of crap in your lifetime, Eric, before, and even though you could say you ignore it, you do ignore it, but you do hear it too. You can lie and sit there and say you don't hear it, but you do hear it. So for all those people, I don't go on Notre Dame websites, Eric, but I'm sure they're still calling, that fat ass Charlie Weis. I mean, I'm sure that those things are still there. Well, when people see me now, a lot of people don't even recognize me, to be honest with you. They don't even know it's you. Then they'll take a double check and they say, nah, it looks like him, but not the same guy. So for all the people, you can say you can't stand me as a person, but don't, I think you better cross the fat off the checklist, because I don't think I actually qualify anymore. Sorry to disappoint America.
I think it's really cool. And I saw the picture that you took with all your guys at the stadium at the Golick Subpar Classic. That was a cool picture. I believe you sent it to me. If you didn't, it was Golick that sent it, but it was a really cool picture.
Yeah, well, that was nice. That was nice to see those guys. See, I always find this humorous. I was perceived, the guy who followed me was perceived as the players coach.
Mhm.
I was perceived as the anti-players coach. And I think if you go back and ask the players, I think you'll find the exact opposite is how they all perceive that.
Charlie, what sort of ties do you still have to the local community that keep you tied to South Bend right now?
Well, I mean, my daughter lives at Hannah and Friends neighborhood, operated and owned by Logan now. We still have the horse operation over there where people, all the people with different abilities go down and spend time with the animals. And, God, the place is named after my wife. It's the Maura Weiss Equine Center. So every month, my wife or I, or both of us we're there every month. We don't miss a month. And we go spend time, at Hannah and Friends neighborhood and with our daughter. And we get weird looks when we go into Martin's. Or when we go into a restaurant. Remember, Eric, I'm the guy who steals all the silverware and is the cheap tipper. I remember somebody writing that article. That's one article I'll never let
I
you.
know you won't forget it.
I know
Neither
that
will I.
But they look at us like, what are you doing here? And we'll be there for the rest of our lives. Because hopefully Hannah outlives us, and we'll always be there to see Hannah. We'll always be there to visit Hannah and Friends neighborhood and make sure we do all we can to help them be successful.
All right. Well, you owe me a cup of coffee next time you have some spare time in
Yeah,
town.
I'm unemployed. You
Oh,
owe me.
okay. Well, I'm buying the coffee or the beer.
You're big time now. You're big time. But yeah, I'll owe you a cup of coffee at the Holiday Inn Express where I stay over by Villa McCree's, because I get it for nothing. So you can come join me over there.
That sounds great.
All
We
right,
really
Charlie.
appreciate you joining us today and your candor, and best of luck with the new grandbaby and with Charlie season down at Ole Miss. Maybe we'll see him in the playoff.
You better hope not.
Okay.
All right. Thanks a lot. Say hello to everyone up there. God bless everyone up there. It's an important part of our lives. And even though people look at us strange when we're there, you can't get rid of us.
Before we get to our question segment, I wanted to remind our listeners of our long-standing subscription promo for InsideNDSports.com. We're offering a 30-day free trial to our podcast listeners who want to try out a subscription to the site. That will get you access to all of our premium football analysis, our recruiting coverage, and the Insider Lounge message board where you don't have to wait for the next podcast to ask us a question. You can take advantage of this offer by using promo code NDPOD, that's NDPOD, when you sign up for a subscription on InsideNDSports.com. You can also find a link to the deal in the podcast description or show notes. I also wanted to take a moment to remind you about our new partner, Autograph. You can now find Inside ND Sports content on the Autograph app, which is free to download on Android and iOS devices. And Autograph just left its beta phase, so we're excited about the progress that Autograph is making. The company, co-founded by Tom Brady, believes that devotion should be rewarded and the future of fandom belongs to fans. There are many cool tools and features in the app, including the daily replay, which summarizes the news from the previous day with links to content you may have missed. If you're watching this on YouTube, you can download this app using the QR code at the bottom of the screen or using the link listed in the video or podcast description. From there, go find our content in the Notre Dame community. Make sure you use referral code INDS so Autograph knows we sent you. All right, now it's time for questions. You can submit questions to us on Twitter or the Insider Lounge message board before every podcast. I'm at TJamesND and Eric's at eHansenND. First one I have for us, Eric, is from ND Navy 86 on the Insider Lounge. I do not rewatch the game in detail. I assume you both do because of your excellent insight, and you're way smarter than me. While Love made some great and timely plays, it seemed to me that some of the sidestep and delay may have hampered the run game at times. Was there no hole available most of the time, or just the wrong hole or wrong decision to delay? Not trying to be nitpicking, as I am proud as can be of the entire team effort, coaching, preparation, and execution.
So Tyler watches the game in great detail. I may watch a highlight or two here or there. So what I think happened in this game, I think early in the game, Mike Denbrock, Notre Dame's offensive coordinator, needed to kind of get a feel for the inventory on defense he was facing in terms of looks, et cetera, for Mike Elko and Jay Bateman, since they weren't coaching that team last year. And so I think that's part of the reason that you didn't see clean creases for Love or Jadarian Price to run into a lot of the time earlier in the game. I think once they got to the point where they say, okay, we understand these looks and so forth, Notre Dame was able to find some holes in that run defense. What I will say is Love was the highest rated offensive player in the game, and his patience on the 21-yard run late in the game allowed him to kind of sneak through a small opening on a run blitz and then outrun everybody. So I don't think it was a matter of him being too hesitant, at least not most of the time.
Yeah, I do rewatch the game, and I do have notes on every single Love run and every other run that was made during the game. But so I did look at those. The only one that I saw, and looking back at my notes, the very first running play that Love had, he made a bad cut on his first run. I'm not sure what he was doing there. Now, granted, I don't know exactly what he's supposed to do always. Like they don't give us the playbook to review the game. But after that, his second run, he gets tackled by the safety for a 2-yard gain. The third run also looked a little strange, I thought, because Love had to take like a wider angle than I think he wanted to, because Sam Pendleton allowed some penetration into the backfield, and that run only netted 1 yard. But yeah, after that, there's a 29-yard run after that was his fourth run. He had a 10-yard run where he did most of the work, a 3-yard run, no gain. Anthony Knapp didn't block anyone on that play. The next no gain, there was no push really across the whole offensive line. He had a loss of 4. Cooper Flanagan whiffed on a block there. He had an 18-yard gain, a 1-yard gain, which is the second to last run that he had before the touchdown. there was just, it looked like bad communication up front. Billy Charles like tried to block two different guys, and that didn't go well. And then he gets loose for the touchdown. So yeah, I mean, Jeremiah Love certainly didn't have a spotless game, but I think because the offense was playing so poorly early in the game, or it like was maybe so uneven. I think the reaction was like, "Oh, what is Jeremiah Love doing?" I think there was just maybe some little in the moment overreaction. I think like I just look and I chart this by like the feedback we're getting during the game in our game thread or on social media. People are like very worried about Riley Leonard. People are very worried like why isn't Howard Cross playing more? And Howard Cross ends up playing more than any defensive lineman on Notre Dame's roster during the game. So I think there's certainly things to clean up there, but it just took Love a little bit and the offensive line a little bit to get on the same page and get things rolling. All right, next question is from LDL Go Irish on the Insider Lounge. Will Notre Dame hold on to all their O linemen after the regular season and before the playoff should ND make that playoff? I would hate to see the backup O lineman leave and the starter get hurt in the first round of the playoff. I am sure some backups believe they are better, and after game 1 against Texas A&M, they could still make that argument. Also, they may want to not wait until after the playoff and miss a transfer opportunity to a certain team that might select someone else should they try to wait. Tough spot. What do you say?
I think this is a really fascinating question and one I hadn't given a lot of thought to
Well, so
till
far,
it was
like
in my face.
it's one game of the season. We're already talking about the end of it. So
Yeah. But I do think it's an interesting question. And there's some unknowns here. So the new portal window time frame this year is December 9th through January 7th. Well, the playoffs still going to be going on, the latter stages of it when that window closes. And there may not be a spring window this year. There's a proposal on the table that the Division I Council will vote on in October to eliminate the spring window. So that could change how this plays out. You know, there were kids that were in the playoff, 14 playoff last year that wanted to be with their teams throughout the playoff and then opted to go somewhere else in the spring. They may not have that opportunity. Look, this is the first time we've seen a 12-team playoff, so this is kind of unprecedented territory for all teams. You know, if there have been playoff opt-outs in the 4-team era, they've been very, very few. I don't remember too many of them. If they have been, they've been injury related. My sense is that the Notre Dame players would be less inclined to leave and bail out on their team during a playoff. I mean, this is what you play for. You want to have a chance at a national championship run. And a lot of these guys picked ND for other reasons besides football. What I will say is there were kids both for maybe it was just for bowl opt-outs, but they put their name in the portal, but they stayed with their team. They played with their team, and that was good with their team, and it was good with the player. So that may be kind of the middle ground that we see.
Am I remembering incorrectly? Aren't you allowed to enter the portal later if your team is still playing? Well, didn't that happen this past year?
I believe so, but I'm not sure with this new proposal what they are doing. I do think that you can do that. If your team's still alive, I do think you are extended. Also, if there's a coaching change at your school. I do believe those are the two, but given the uncertainty with the new legislation, I didn't want to go throw that out there. So I'm glad you mentioned it.
Yeah, and so that could be one thing that solves it, but obviously that doesn't solve the problem of you needing to find a new home and those maybe some of those spots filling up before you enter the portal. So it's certainly a tough situation. From my perspective, I would wonder if like Marcus Freeman would be fine with guys entering the portal, but also wanting to stay with the team if that was their situation. Like I wonder if you have to have more flexibility as a coach in that situation, because I mean there's only so much, like the player has to use this calendar that is dictated by the NCAA. So it makes it a little bit uncomfortable there. But to me, the biggest reason it's hard to say is because like we don't know what is going to happen between now and then for some of those backup linemen. They could play some of them could end up being a starter. Like there's so much that can happen between now and then for this hypothetical. But yeah, it's certainly, I think at least someone is going to have a tough decision that they have to consider given the circumstance and the way the transfer portal is set up. All right, next question is from @Charles W. Wolf. With the NFL caliber challenge behind them, what can the offensive line do to continue to improve? Is it just a matter of reps and continuity?
I asked Mike Denbrock that question Tuesday night at the coordinator availability, and his answer was consistency. So how do you build that consistency? Well, you use the game reps to build. So that involves a lot of film study, not just your opponent, but of yourselves. Like you watch the situations from the Texas A&M game. You talk through the things that will help build cohesion and chemistry so that the next time you face that situation, you'll process it the same. You'll have a better answer. And you could even hear Anthony Knapp on Tuesday night already kind of figuring some things out when he was talking out loud about some of the situations he faced.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because the question is sort of presented like the first game was the finish line, whereas obviously, obviously that was the biggest task that was in front of them. But there's still plenty of work for them to get to do. I think everyone has something to do. There's individual and unit growth that needs to be made. So, I think so. It's sort of business as usual. Like just because you made it through the first game doesn't mean anything really changes. You still have to work just as hard to keep improving and continue on that track. All right, next question is from Bob Oxnard on the Insider Lounge. How much do you expect Armel Mucum to play this Saturday?
I think until Gabe Rubio comes back, I think you'll see him in games like Northern Illinois, Purdue, and Miami. In part, they'll expand the rotation a little bit more in the interior to include him. And then the reps get tougher when Gabe gets back. He'll likely be back either for the Louisville game at the end of the month or after the bye versus Stanford on October 12th.
Yeah, I would think Mucum will play a decent amount this game. I don't know if he'll be a part of like the first half rotation. Some of my assumption would be that the second half is more comfortable for Notre Dame, and that would open up the door for opportunity there. But yeah, I think he's someone that they need to get some reps for, because he's sort of that next in line guy and didn't get any work against Texas A&M.
We ought to ask the person that reported the secret Howard Cross injury that didn't exist.
All right. Next question is from @Enforcers2117. Do you think this will be a game we can take the starters out in the third quarter, or do you think we keep the starters in because the O-line is inexperienced and Riley can get more timing with the O since he missed spring ball? Only talking about the offense because I fully expect to rest the defense.
So as a coach, you don't plan to do that. I think you have that in your back pocket. For example, Brian Kelly talked about this going into the Ball State game. I think it was in 2018. And then he had to play everyone to the end in that game. That was a white knuckler. But let's say this is a 35-3 game at game's end. It's 28-3 going into the fourth quarter. Riley and the offensive linemen need game reps. The wide receivers do too. Those are really good points. I think any earlier than the start of the fourth quarter, you're probably not getting the most out of this game. I think there's a line where you don't want to get them. You do want to get them out of the game to prevent injury. This isn't so much about thinking about 2025 and getting people game reps for that as it is that line between preventing injury and so forth. But I think end of the third quarter, if it's a 28-3 game, I think that's about the time that you would look at other people on offense.
Yeah, I don't think I suppose you could keep the offensive in line longer and sometimes offensive line in longer, and sometimes the offensive line is like the last group to get subbed out in blowouts like that. But I don't think it's that necessary. I think it would be important to let some of the backups get some action too, especially when you're talking about experienced guys who lost position battles, to get them out there and get some work and keep them motivated and prepared for any opportunities that come later in the season. So I think that I don't know that there would be a lot of extra value in keeping the offensive line or Riley Leonard out there longer in the third quarter of a blowout, or the fourth quarter, that will be worth like, okay, we just need more time with those guys, because I just don't know that the competition level that they would be facing at that point of the game would be something that would really be helping them. All right, next question is from Marie Biafore at Biafore_Marie. Since the most improvement on a team is supposed to happen between week 1 and week 2, what will you both be looking for this weekend against NIU?
And Marie, I'm so happy you said it's supposed to happen between week 1 and week 2, because that's BS. I think statistics bear that out. Maybe with some teams in some years, the most improvement is between 1 and 2, but a lot of teams peak later. I think this team will hit its stride later, but I do think this week is a valuable opportunity to improve, and you could see it across the board. I mean, there's a whole top 100 list, but I think a couple of tellable ways, things that you could see improvement, that regardless of the opponent, you say, okay, I'm seeing something here. Fewer penalties and a more dynamic passing game. Those are the two things that I think could jump out at you in this game.
Yeah, I had written down better timing and cohesion in the passing game. That I think as the game went on, I think Riley Leonard and the wide receivers were better with that, but still plenty of room to improve there. And then I thought, in addition to the penalties being cleaned up, like improved communication and fewer missed assignments on the offensive line. Because if you go through and watch, you'll see plays where guys aren't even blocking someone, and that's usually a mistake and hesitation that causes that. And so those are things that I think can and should be cleaned up going into this second game of the season. All right, our last question is from at Mike Devoy1. If Clemson and Florida State manage to sue or buy their way out of the ACC, which conference is most likely to accept them, the Pac-2 or the MAC? Seriously, I don't see the SEC or Big Ten taking them.
I think that was funny comment, and I think it's true. I think that the SEC and the Big Ten would have the leverage in those discussions, and they may not be interested. Certainly, what we've seen hints of at this point is they're not. They're thinking, why should we divide the pie further if these programs aren't going to make the pie bigger? In general, I think there's other teams in the conference that are more coveted. North Carolina definitely comes to mind in terms of improving the footprint, having broader based programs, the academic piece, all those things make North Carolina. I've heard Virginia as well. So, but where would they go? I mean, I think that's a great question. I mean, I don't know that the Big 12 is a step up for them. I think, where they are right now is probably the best place, especially with Florida State being 0-2 at this point. They may want, and Clemson 0-1 and getting blown out, they may want to say, hey, maybe the ACC isn't so bad.
Yeah, as funny as it is, like I think it'd be foolish to be making your decision based on the record on the field for either of these teams, whether it's this year or next year.
I was kidding too. Yes, I understand that.
So, like, I still think they would be attractive programs. I don't think like what Clemson and FSU are trying to do with the ACC now, and I think part of the issue is like they want to dictate the terms and they want to be worth more than all the other programs in the ACC. Like, I don't think the SEC or Big Ten are going to like give those schools whatever they want. That's not what's going to happen. But I do think that they would find a home probably in whatever comes next. Like, I think a lot of it would be determined by like what's the process of this. Do all these different ACC schools sort of become up for grabs at the same time, or do these two schools get a jump on everyone by this lawsuit process? I don't really know how any of that's going to work out. But there are plenty of worse programs in both of those conferences than Florida State and Clemson. So I think they're probably not going to get exactly what they want. But if they want a new home, I would be a bit surprised if they absolutely couldn't get into the SEC or Big Ten. All right,
not so sure.
All right, that is it for today's episode of the Inside ND Sports Podcast. If you don't already, you can subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and other popular podcast platforms. If you like what you hear, give us a star rating, leave a review, and share our podcast feed with someone who's planning to raise an offensive coordinator. As I mentioned earlier, we're offering a 30-day free trial to InsideNDSports.com to our podcast listeners who want to try out a subscription to the site. Just use promo code NDPOD when you sign up for a subscription. You can also find a link to the deal in the podcast description or show notes. We're almost to 3,000 subscribers on YouTube after the season opener, so please go subscribe to us on there if you haven't already. We have Place Your Bets with our Northern Illinois predictions coming Friday, and then Eric and I will share our post-game takeaways after the game. And as always, we have plenty of written content to get you ready for Saturday, so stick with InsideNDSports.com for all your Notre Dame football coverage needs.